Welcome to another episode of Next Level Teaching Podcast here in Ohio. Y'all make some noise. Yes. Even I know. Man, Jeremy Anderson here, your host. Super excited for you all to be here today. For those of you watching online, we have a live recording of our Next Level Teaching Podcast. My co-host, Tori Rodriguez, wishes she could be here, but today is her mom's birthday. And if any, oh, really? Happy birthday. Let me get your Cash App afterwards. Yeah. I'm serious too. Right. But you know, one thing about Tori, like she's serious about her family. So I'm thinking about Tori today. But I've got two awesome guests. The first one I'm going to introduce, and then I'll ask you to kind of share maybe a word yourself, is Hali Chase. Y'all put your hands together for Hali. Welcome her.
Like you said, I'm Hali Chase. I teach at a high school in Jackson County, Georgia. This is my 10th year teaching. I have taught leadership. Right now I teach Spanish. I've served as the cheerleading coach and football academic coach. So I've done a little bit of everything. A little bit about me. I have two young kiddos. I have a 5-month-old at home. So I'm really excited to get back to her, but so excited to be here with you guys. Other than that, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you guys.
Wow. Amazing. So you said, leadership, Spanish, football, academic coach, and cheerleading. That's a lot.
All the things.
I love it. That's amazing. And then our next guest, which is someone really special to me, one of my dear friends, and she's a part of my program community, Dr. Nekeshia Hammond. Y'all show her some love.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I'm Dr. Nekeshia Hammond. I'm a psychologist, author, and speaker. My specialty area is actually ADHD, learning disabilities, gifted testing. So that's what I specialize in when I'm at my practice, which is in the Tampa Bay area of Florida. I also travel all over and speak about children's mental health as well. And I've written a couple of books related to children's mental health. On the personal side, I'm a mom to, I think, the most amazing 10-year-old son, and a wife, and trying to juggle life like all of us. So I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Glad you're here.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this here, right? You said you opened it up and you said that, you know, specifically, you kind of specialize in the ADHD space. Mm-hmm. So you can relate a lot to me and my story, right?
Yeah.
Just super hyper, really short attention span. Do you find that oftentimes those kids that kind of can all be all over the place are actually gifted?
Yes.
And can you talk about that? Because when we think about entrepreneurship, we think about the possibilities, like what these kids can experience. Mm-hmm. Like oftentimes those kids that give us the most challenges or have the most challenges, once they're able to get a handle on it, can experience some really amazing things. And that can actually be like an advantage. So can you speak to that?
Yeah. I see this constantly. Like I said, I'm going on my 14th year of practice in January, and I've seen so many kids, especially with ADHD, who are really creative. They're great leaders. However, they're getting in trouble in school. They have behavioral issues because they don't know how to manage the attention issues. They don't know how to manage the hyperactivity. But that's why I always like to share with educators, though. It's really good if we can understand there's so many modifications, accommodations that can be done in school to help them thrive. And I've seen that when it's put into place. And since we're talking about entrepreneurship today, I mean, there's so many amazing, we even know adults, of course, that have ADHD who are amazing entrepreneurs. It's just a matter of helping them understand. One right here. It's just a matter of understanding, though, how to manage those types of symptoms. But yeah, I see that all the time.
Wow. So Hali, let me ask you this here, right? With you working in teaching leadership and academic coach and cheerleading coach and football liaison and all of that, I'm sure you've come across students who were all over the place.
Just a few.
Right. But when you're really able, in your 10 years, and you're really able to really lock in with them, you're able to see that greatness so much more inside of them. Like, can you speak to that?
Absolutely. I think the one thing that's really helped me hone in on that is just changing the question, because I deal with high school students primarily. Not what school are you going to after college or after high school? It's what's your next step after high school? Mm-hmm. And once you ask that question and change that question, it really lets their walls fall down and they can like share with me what they want to do. And that, as you're speaking, I have this one gentleman in mind who just graduated high school and his mom was really writing him to go to school. And he just looked at me and was like, Coach, that's not what I want to do. Mm-hmm. I need to be with people. I need to be talking to people. Mm-hmm. And it was just that relationship we built. And he is thriving. He is he's 18 because we have the same birthday. So he just turned 18 and he is a real estate agent, like not fully selling anything yet, but he's getting like working with other people and he's networking and all these things. And it was just honing in on his people skills and saying, hey, Jay, like you need to work with people, and knowing that his step was not the traditional step like we're supposed to take, and realizing that that's how you have to focus that narrative now and just figure out what he likes and hone in on those skills.
Yeah.
Wow. So real estate.
Yeah.
18 years old. That's amazing and promising. But it goes to show like what happens when we have those students who can sometimes be in a weird place, but we just have kind of like redirect them. Right. So let's pivot for a minute. Right. And we'll come back to entrepreneurship. The pandemic has had a major impact. How is it now that you're back in, you're seeing the kids in the swing of things? Like, how's that transition been?
It's been tough because most of my students have come from being at home by themselves. Parents are working and they're policing themselves, or in most cases, not policing themselves. And I mean, we've all been there, the ones that are not on Zoom or you're staring at their ceiling fan, and it's awesome. But reining them back in has been hard. And we all call it like the dog and pony show you have to do in education. And it was really hard that first year back. But now it's kind of honing back in on those skills that you used while they were out and at home, and trying to incorporate technology more so, but into those skills that they like. So I found more so letting them just figure out what way can you present that you know this, and not just that typical project-based learning that we do, but allowing them a lot more voice and choice in what we do, because they were choosing what they wanted at what time they wanted for a whole year. And I know I have more leniency because I have high school students and I can say, hey, here's your parameters, let's do it within this. But it has really just been giving them a lot more choice and trying to figure out what their skills are to make them focus, because most of them are in Spanish to hit a requirement for graduation. They're not there because they love the language like I do. But it's like helping them and just saying, hey, can you use this next year? Can you use this when you leave me? And then figuring out, yeah, I can, but how can I use it?
So speaking of that, interesting enough, last year, our company, the Jeremy Anderson Group, we did a partnership with Rabin Gap, which is a private school, very prestigious private school in Atlanta. And we did what's in the outskirts of Atlanta. And we partnered with AT&T, and we created an innovation challenge. This was our first annual innovation challenge. AT&T was a sponsor. And the theme of the challenge was get home safe. And so what we did was we realized that during 9/11, when we were under attack, and there was a communication issue. So now we've got where I reached out to all the schools I've been privileged to partner with over the years, and we put together a bunch of teams from the East Coast, West Coast, all over. And these young people are now creating apps and technology that can assist when it comes to communication. Imagine, these are middle school and high school students, and I go to a lot of inner city schools, a lot of rural schools, right? But they all have their own subgroups and teams, and they're creating technology, they're creating apps, so if a 9/11 ever happens again, we can continue to keep the communication. So it was like the All Home Safe Innovation Challenge, And so I share that because when we think about these young people and what they're able to do, you said it like, hey, they can pick and choose, they can use their creativity to see some of the things that these students came up with. It was absolutely mind-blowing. And that was another project I got to do with Mason West, because he's one of the directors of Raven Gap. And so we were able to actually do that together. So to see these kids create these apps, create this technology, and to be, that's going to save lives. The sponsors at AT&T were sitting back and looking at them like, wow, these are middle school and high school kids, And so, but oftentimes, these are kids that's getting in trouble. These are kids that are hyperactive. These are kids with short attention spans. These are kids that's always talking back. These are kids that easily get bored. That was me. My son's teacher is texting us twice a week, like, hey, I had to redirect Jackson 18 times. I'm like, he's my son. You're going to have to keep redirecting him, right? And she's like, I don't want to nitpick, but, and I'm like, he's 4. By the way, he's 4, right? Like not even 14. But he gets bored easily. And so I'm thinking about what you're saying with that one student. Now he's in real estate. It's like this energy, this drive that they have. We can just guide them in the right direction. And I was so proud to see these middle school and high school kids from all over the country, create these apps, create this technology, and then present this in front of AT&T's board. I was super proud.
That's amazing.
So let me ask you, Dr. Hammond, when it comes to these young students, like what are some things that our educators, our listeners can do when it comes to connecting, building relationships, getting creative and innovative when it comes to like harnessing their focus, their attention when these kids can be all over the place?
Yeah, that's a great question. And really it's so important. And I think you actually said it earlier in your keynote of how important it is to connect with these students, because I can't tell you how many students I've met. I mean, students that have been on the verge of wanting to hurt or kill themselves because they feel like no one cares about them. Like, it's just so it seems simple, but it's so powerful when you really connect with a student. We have no idea what's going on sometimes in their personal lives. You don't know what happened the night before. I remember I had a student once way back when I did my residency in the school system. And the teacher was like, oh, this student is lazy. He's not doing his work. He's refusing. And so anyhow, so I talked with a student and found out the night before he went to class that he was hiding in a bathtub because he heard gunshots around his house. Like, that was his night before. And we're wondering why he's breaking down and can't do his work. You know what I mean? Like, that's what he was going through. But instead of thinking, oh, he's lazy, he doesn't want to do it, and all these sorts of things, to connect, how are you doing? It's a really basic question, but it means a lot. And even if, I want to remind everyone, even if that student's like, oh, nothing, or I'm fine, or that sort of thing, they still care that someone asked about their day. They still care that someone tried to connect with them. It really does make a difference. Like I said, I've had a lot of conversation with students, and the things they roll their eyes about and all those sorts of things, it still goes in. And I hear on the other side, like, yeah, it kind of did mean something. You know what I mean? But they might not necessarily know that. But overall, I would say it's really critical to be planting seeds, because it's very impactful. So plant the seeds, make sure they know that they are cared about, that someone cares about them in their day, because it really goes a long way. And at the end of the day, at this point, sadly, we're literally saving lives that way by showing them that we connect to them and we care.
That was a really good point, which shows that you're a true professional at what you do, because you would encourage these kids. Yeah, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you're speaking life. How was your day? I care about you. What's going on? Share it, whatever. On the outside, they act like they're hard. They don't really want to care. But on the inside, they're like, man, somebody really asked about me. And I think sometimes, even as educators, it's like, okay, we want to inspire them. We want to challenge them. We want them to be able to go on and do great things inside their lives. But we have to ask ourselves, okay, what kind of world are they living in? I created a program in Atlanta. I was going to the Fulton County Jail for several years, once a week, and I would speak, and I would bring books, and I would bring donuts, I would bring Bibles, I bring all sorts of things for the inmates there. But it wasn't the regular inmates. They were the 17-year-olds. In Atlanta, they don't even wait for you to turn 18, right? They're going to lock you up at the age of 17, and it was 2 different pods. And so here I am. I would show up, and I'm speaking to them, and these guys are dealing with some heavy stuff. Some of them armed robbery, attempted murder, assault, like just some real heavy stuff, right? And it's heartbreaking. And so whenever I would be there, I would see like a lost innocence in their eyes. And I'll never forget this one situation. I just got back from Australia speaking. This is probably maybe 6 years ago. I just got back, still dealing with jet lag, still tired, but still drove 30, 40 minutes across town for the program. And I'm in the middle of the program, and one guy stands up. This guy's like 6'2", the biggest 17-year-old I've ever seen in my life, right? It's like 6'2", 280, tattoos on his neck and his face. He is fully committed to this lifestyle, right? He stands up, and he pounds his hands on the table and was like, ah! And I was like, use your words, right? Like, he's like 4 inches taller than me, an extra 100 pounds. I'm like, man, what's going on? He says, I'm just so frustrated. I'm like, okay, well, why are you frustrated? He was like, man, we need more from you. Haley, I was feeling a certain type of way. Because I'm like, there's nobody else in Atlanta that comes to see y'all. You guys are on a 23-1. That means 23 hours a day you're locked up. You get out for 1 hour. All these successful entrepreneurs and attorneys and ball players and celebrities and business owners and educators and social work, no one else is showing up. But you saying you need more from me. And I was jet lagged. I was tired. Now, I didn't say this to him, but this is how I was feeling. I was like, okay, you need more from me. what else can I do? He was like, well, he was kind of huffing and puffing. He was like, well, you bring us books and you tell us all the time how you read to your kids at night. And with tears in his eyes, he said, why don't you ever read to us? This kid's wanting like story time. He's like, you read to your kids. You say you love your kids. You talk to us. You mentor us. You pray with us. You tell us you love us. But how come you don't ever read to us? We never had a father's read. Listen, like this guy, once he turned 18, he probably looking at the 10 years in prison. But I'm seeing like the pain on the inside, right? And I share that because we never know what these kids have going on, which is why I always say we got to reach them before we teach them. So it's like, yeah, we want to teach them. Yeah, we want to help them with entrepreneurship. Yeah, we want to help them to think big, but we got to really understand where they are currently inside their personal world. And that experience changed my life because the world would view him as a thug. The world would view him as a goon, as a gangster. He's got tats on his face and his neck and everything. But I view him as someone that's lost, someone that wished they had a dad, someone that wished they was being tucked in at night, like somebody, that just longing for that. And so I felt so horrible, too, for feeling how I felt being jet lagged, right? But I share that with you all because I think it's important that we have to ask ourselves, okay, what is it these kids are dealing with? What's going on inside the world? Let's identify that. And then we can connect with them on a deeper level. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so let's talk about that because, and I'll open it up. I'm going to come to you first, and then I'll come to you. What questions can we ask? Like, what can we do to get nosy? I feel like the most effective educators are those who are most nosy, right? Would y'all agree? Right, the nosier you are, the more information, the more intel you can gather, the more you can support these kids. Would you all agree? Yes. Okay. So the more information, the more intel you have, the better chances you have of connecting. What advice would you give our audience when it comes to connecting, when it comes to pulling stuff out of the students? And then I'll do the same for you.
Yeah. And sometimes it's really just even the basic questions. So saying like, what do you like to do for fun? Most people have different things that they enjoy. What are their interests? I know for my son, he is really into sports. Like everything is sports for him, right? But for some kids, it's music. For some kids, it's arts or acting or, whatever it is that they're really into. And you may see them actually light up. Like some kids are dealing with the depression. They're dealing with the anxiety. But you start to say, what are your interests? What are you interested in? And talk to them about that. Even if you're not interested in that, really goes a long way. Or asking, do you have any siblings? What did you eat for dinner? I mean, they sound like basic questions, but you start to hear stories and start to learn more about what happened the night before, which again, as I mentioned, we have no idea what's going on. There was several studies actually that showed there were hundreds of thousands of kids during the pandemic who lost either a primary or secondary caregiver. So as much as we're affected by this pandemic, so are kids that now have no mom, no dad, or grandparent, aunt, uncle, or whoever it was that was taking care of them in their house. I mean, hundreds of thousands of kids, especially in Black and Brown communities. There was a disproportionate amount of loss. So we have to understand, like, this is what kids are going through right now. So asking them, what did you eat for dinner? And they're like, well, was it McDonald's or did they sit down with a family or were they in their room by themselves? Like, right? Like that makes a difference. And you start to see, instead of saying the harder questions, right, that no kid wants to answer, they can answer things like that and you can learn a roundabout way of what's happening in their lives.
Absolutely. That's good. Haley?
So the high school kids are usually the hardest ones to reach, I have found, because they've built that wall and it's 16 years of that wall and you're not going to tear it down. And I really feel like I co-taught leadership last year with an amazing educator who's now since retired, but I really feel like we did a good job of just figuring out the teenager as a whole. And when you think about all we do as educators, you're like, okay, that's an awesome idea, but where's the time to do it? Because we have a million things on our plates. But when we taught leadership, we thought, here's the first thing you need to do. You have to figure out who you are as a leader in order to lead others. And we really told our students that. So we took the time to take all these leadership tests and then figure out their leadership styles. And one of our students was like, okay, but we figured out that I'm a blue in this and I'm a D in the disc assessment and I'm this and this, but like, who am I? And that really kind of hit us. And we were like, you know what, you're right. So how do we get the class to know each other before we can lead the rest of the school? Like, we have to look like a cohesive unit. So my co-teacher and I took the time, and it took us 2 weeks because, we have to all the things, but we wrote a note to each kid in the class just to say, hi, I'm really impressed with XYZ that you did. And again, it took us 2 weeks. The kids didn't know we were doing it. Once we handed them out, you saw like them being like, whoa, you noticed I had a pink eraser that day? And these are high school kids. And then we asked them all to bring a composition notebook because they're 109 with inflation probably, but like they're not expensive. And we started doing weekly journal entries in which we just wrote like, how you living? And we just said, elaborate and like write as much as you want or as much as little. And then sometimes we gave them topics like, what was one thing that happened last week? Yeah. And high schoolers hate to be vocal about their vulnerabilities. They don't want to talk about it. Everything's great until it's not, basically. And so what we found is when we did once a week journal entries, it gave us time to go through and read them and respond. And we didn't set a time limit. We didn't say, we're going to get these back to you tomorrow, because that's impossible with 27 teenagers writing 2 pages. But it really was something useful that we could just figure out who our kids were as a whole. And we had several of my football players who, from the academic coach standpoint, I was like, wow, he just does nothing in class. I don't know what to do with him. And then reading his page, he's at home by himself. Mom's never there. She's like buying him shoes to buy his love. And he was like, that's cool, but I'd rather my mom be there. And for him to put that in writing I was like, wow, you're not a turd. Like, I do see you as a person. And those journals were just something that was just like a little tool we pulled out, and we could just figure out who they were and just see like this. And it was something easy. We didn't have to do it every single day for them to feel connected to us and feel like they had somebody they could talk to, because us responding was not out loud and showing their vulnerabilities to the rest of the class. It was just between us and them.
Oh, you kind of figure out what's important and what's highlighted to them. And one more thing I'll share is we have to do a better job, I believe, of listening, because there are some students that will tell you clearly what they're interested in. And because I feel like educators in America are extremely underpaid and compensated, I always feel leery when I share this, but I'm still going to share it. Because I never want to be the person that says, go out and spend a whole bunch of extra money, even though you're getting paid a fraction of your worth. But if you're having a hard time connecting with students, and say you have one particular student and you know they're into cars, you'd be surprised how far an $8 Motor Trend magazine will go, or an $8, $9, $7 Hot Rod magazine will go. Just something that's interests them. Or if she's into cosmetology or hair, and you get her a Cosmopolitan magazine or a Vogue magazine, just something that says, hey, I know you're into fashion. I saw this Vogue magazine. I thought it costs you $6, right? Maybe $4. But the fact that some kids, like you say, are going to take it and be like, thanks. But they're going to go in the bathroom and be like, oh my God. Yeah. But there are some that's going to be like, oh my God, right there in front of you. So these are some small things that we can do to really build that relationship, to let them know I see you. And let me share one more thing while we're on that topic. I tell educators this: if you all have students and you can relate to their story, you can relate to what they have going on, there is so much power there, right? So maybe when that kid says, man, my mom and dad split up, like my dad has this weekend, maybe your parents got divorced. There's a chance to connect. Hey, Daoud, man, I know your parents are dealing with divorce. My parents got divorced as well. When I was your age, I thought it was my fault. I realize now it wasn't. I hope you don't feel that way, but you have a chance to make a connection, right? There is power there. What happens if you can't relate? What if I told you that there is still strength even if you can't relate? What happens when you sit Sabrina down and say, Sabrina, I read what you put in your journal, which is brilliant, by the way. I read what you put in your journal, and I just want you to know, like, I honestly have a hard time relating. What you've gone through is so painful, but I have to tell you, I'm amazed at your strength. Your tenacity, your resiliency is so impressive. I don't know if I could handle what you're going through the way that you handle it. I'm a fan of yours. I am so proud of your strength. Do y'all know
That's powerful.
What that's going to do in the hearts and minds of those child? When you say, that's not my story, right? I was privileged. I grew up in a home with a mom and a dad, and even though I had a scholarship, they still had a whole bunch of money saved up for me to go to college, and they put down the down payment on my first home. Like, I come from a different world, and to see all that you're having to endure, but you still show up every single day, I am so impressed, and I'm committed to helping you grow. That's how you build connection, right? And so oftentimes that's that one thing, because kids want to feel seen.
Yeah.
They want to feel heard and accepted.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. They are, as we know, they're so bombarded with negativity, especially with social media, especially with what they see, especially with the rumors, especially with the cyberbullying. I mean, they are bombarded with negativity. So to your point, to point out their strength is so powerful. Again, we don't know what their home life is. We don't know what they're going through, what their peers say or whomever says what. But for one person at least, hopefully, to point out their strengths is really powerful.
Absolutely.
Really
Absolutely.
powerful.
So I'm going to ask you both this one question. Tell me either how speaking life, affirming kids, or our belief in students has been a game changer or helped to build that connection.
Well, I don't know if I can do that without getting emotional.
Give it to us.
I gotta think, which one do I want to talk about?
Right.
I mean, it's just like seeing them, like what you were saying, just makes an impact. And I got one student that just comes to mind, and every day she's dress coded every day, and she just feels like weighed down, and no one appreciates her, no one gets her, and she just has this huge wall built up. And they've put her in our leadership class as a last resort, just kind of like, oh, here's a class sticker in it. So me and my co-teacher was an administrator, so we're both kind of like, okay, what do we do with this kid?
Right.
So I'll call her Sally, so I don't use her real name. So Sally every day is like, we're talking crop top, the shortest shorts. Like, I'm looking at her like, you got to be cold, because these schools are 5 degrees. And she just doesn't want to do anything. She doesn't want to go around the school. She doesn't believe that there should be a dress code. Like, she's posting flyers on the walls about it. And finally, she just looked at us and she was like, why even is there a dress code? Why? And it kind of like derailed our whole class, because we were going in a different way, trying to plan this like scholarship thing we were going to do for the school. And we all just kind of sat down and we were like, why do we have this? Why can't you wear hats and hoods with your mask? Why can't you have your belly button out? Why can't you have all that? And we sat down and had the conversation, and it was nice to have an administrator like be able to give us the rule-y part, but just to say like, a lot of this is for your safety. And she understood that like hoods and hats, like you can't tell who anybody is on the cameras if you got a hood and hats on and all that. And then she understood like we weren't trying to preach modesty to her, but we were just trying to tell her the expectations, and especially because she was in our leadership class. Like, you want to walk in and look presentable if you're going to present to a class. And we were telling her, we're like, Sally, you don't have to have like a full piece suit on. Like, that's not realistic for a 17-year-old girl. But it's like how you present yourself and what you want to be seen as. And she was like, well, people call me this and this and that, so I'm just going to wear that. And I was like, well, let's talk about that. And I kind of like pulled her aside and was like, why do you think that? So we were able to have a conversation about that. And I finally, the next day said, all right, let me follow up on this. So all of this happened. We derailed the class, and I felt like she just kind of walked out with like, all right, I get it. But I wrote her a note the next day, and I was like, I really like how you used your voice, going off of how you said being seen. I said, I really like how you used your voice to guide us yesterday and to try and start like a real conversation, because I really just felt like the student wanted to be heard. And I slipped it to her as she walked in, and she was like, what is this? And I was like, oh, it's just something good. And so she read it, and at the end of the class, she was like, thank you for hearing me. And I talked to her. I talked to her this morning, just checking in on her. Wow. And by the end of the year, she was leading. We did a student staff basketball game. She was out there with like the microphone. She started wearing more clothes. So we got to her there. But she was one of our top leaders. And I really think it was just because like we took the time to listen and to see her. And not saying you have to write a note to every student, but just like it maybe took me 5 minutes to write a note to her and say like, here's your strength, is like leading things and talking and making your voice heard and speaking for others that don't want to speak. And just seeing that what she needed was to be heard just made like a huge impact on her. And I've tried to, since working with her, like listen to other students and say, okay, why is their guard up? What's going on? And try and figure that out. And I realize we have a lot of students every single day, so you can't hit each one. But if you can get a couple, not even just one, if you can get a couple every day and just like listen really like he was saying, it really does make an impact because you might be the only person that like listens that day, the only person they actually have a real conversation to or with.
That's good. So she felt seen, she felt heard, she felt celebrated. And you validated her. You affirmed her. Like, hey, thank you for using your voice and for guiding the conversation.
I mean, she wasn't happy about the things, but she felt heard
Right,
for sure. Yeah.
right, yeah, for sure. Okay, that's rich.
Yeah. No, I love that too. I'll just add to that. I know we've seen on social a lot. I love seeing those stories actually with different educators that are doing different things in the classroom, whether it be affirmations, the positivity. I always love to see those stories. I think they're very heartwarming. And I remember I was talking with a student. He was 19 years old a couple years ago, and so again, I've been in practice almost 14 years. Of all my years, had the worst trauma history I've ever heard, ever, in my time in mental health. Every type of trauma you can think of, he went through, like, just check them all off, right? If there's 10, everything. Horrific story. To the point where I'm like, okay, how are you sitting in front of me today? Because should have not been based on what he went through. And I'll never forget, he said it was a PE coach for him. There was just time after time after time, horrific time in school, horrific time, family, no level of support, no level of anything, every single type of trauma. But it was a PE coach for him who believed in him and who shifted his life, frankly, in high school. And at that point, when I was doing the testing with him, he was going on to go to college and he was really interested in sport and like completely turned his life around. And I was like, that's so amazing. So I always remember that story because I'm a huge advocate, obviously, for mental health, for therapy and whatnot, but also even in the classroom, even in school settings, like there's such an opportunity to be turning people's lives around simply by believing in them. Like you said, that was a huge change. What happened with the girl that you talked about, right? Because someone believed in her, because someone heard her. The same thing with this kid. I mean, yeah. Rough life, but was able to turn it around because one person in his life, which was his PE coach, believed in him. So it's really powerful, these messages.
Yeah. I believe that, belief is the bedrock, the cornerstone, the foundation, right? Like when we talk about, because there's levels to it. It's what's one thing that, okay, we want you in school, we want you to get good grades, graduate, contribute to society. But that next level now was us challenging them, okay, entrepreneurship, okay, think bigger. Like think about starting a company, getting your LLC, your DUNS number, your EIN, like really being an official business entrepreneur. Like it's like we want to push that, but it's like we have to push the belief. We have to let them know this is possible. We have to let them know we see these great things inside of you. And I feel like as long as we have that balance and we're intentional about that, it's only a matter of time before they really take root, they really believe, they really say, okay, this is what's possible for me. But sometimes before we even get there, we have to work with them to say, hey, journal and write down how you're feeling, or we asking questions, or we're having one-on-one sessions with them and we're getting deeper and we're getting nosy and we're doing whatever we can to build connection with them. And I believe that once we're connected with them, it's like we're that power source, and now we can guide them. Now we can help them go to the next level. Y'all want to take some questions from the audience?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so audience, we're coming to you now, right? And this is a live recording, so don't be having crickets, okay? I want to just, you don't have to come up and get the microphone, but you can just kind of just stand and just kind of share your question. But we do want to take some time before we wrap it up and just kind of see what questions you all might have for us. So who wants to go first? Or I can just go to each person. Yes, sir.
Sure. So when you talk about the strategies like the journaling to get to those students that might have a hard time bringing up what's going on in their lives, have you encountered a student that you have realized needed some kind of help, and maybe those more passive methods aren't working? How might you help that student? What strategy might you find a resource to help that student if you're aware that they aren't wanting to share,
So, like,
or don't have your trust?
Gotcha. So I have two examples. One like very extreme for what we were able to do, and one kind of like typical type thing. We have what was called a care closet at our last school, and we knew that this one student was struggling with what we called food insecurities, and they were those students that only ate when they came to school. And every day he was just sluggish, and finally one day he was just like, I'm just hungry in class. That's why I'm bored, and that's why I'm not paying attention. So we started just like, me and my co-teacher, like a snack bin, and just were like, hey guys, opened it to the whole class, and we're like, hey, if you need a snack during the middle of class, have at it. So one day this student came up and had snacks, and we were like, hey, if you need to take some home, because he had football practice after school, you need to take some home, take some with you, because we know you're hungry after practice. Really kind of intending like, take some for the afternoon, for the evening, because if you're not eating, take some. And just kind of being aware of that. We also reached out to, because knowing he was on the football team, because, you know, they love to sport their shirts, to a coach and saying, hey, what else do you know? And just using our resources that way, knowing who else he would talk to, or if they knew anything about the parents, so we could find out about. And then we had another, like my extreme example, we had a student that wrote, he was working every day and he was tired because he was trying to save up money to buy a bike so that he didn't have to walk to work every day. And so we were like, holy crap. So between me and my co-teacher, we took to social media, and I posted on my neighborhood Facebook page, like, anybody have the bike they're trying to get rid of? And luckily one of the ladies in my neighborhood did, so we got him a bike. And then my co-teacher had someone that knew that would fix it up for free. So we were able to, like, at the end of the semester, be like, Merry Christmas, here is your bike. And it was just kind of taken to like other people around us. And I will never forget that. It was a young boy just like crying because we had bought him a bike and he could get to and from work and now save his money for whatever he needed it for. And it was just a small little things, like reaching out to other people and figuring out who could help us help them. Because like the young man that had the food insecurities, they don't always tell us, like you said. And we just had to figure out like, okay, what can we piece together to know like what he needs? And like, especially with those high schoolers, like they don't like to tell us things. So making it for like, hey, everybody have snacks, and making it not so obvious that we're just honing in on them, that really helped us too.
Yeah.
You said, hey, everybody have snacks. Okay. Okay. I thought you said, hey, everybody have sex.
No, snacks.
Did y'all see what
I'm voting that.
Yeah, let's not promote.
Definitely not in high
I
school.
know we're trying to build connection with them, but man.
Let's not promote that.
Okay. Whew, okay. Next question.
I didn't even hear that, Jeremy.
Next question.
Can I
Yes,
just respond
yes.
really quickly to yours? I also wanted to add on the mental health side, because as a psychologist, I'm very aware there's a huge stigma with mental health treatment. There's a lot of families that are not, for many reasons, going to go to therapy, nor are their children, because of cost, because of healthcare, the stigma, right? So what I always say to educators is, then there's an opportunity in the classroom to be teaching, not just to that one child that really needs it, but the entire classroom, mindfulness strategies, relaxation strategies. I know when people hear mindfulness, they think it's like a 1 hour time period or whatnot, but even teaching 60 seconds, teaching kids how to take a minute, I call it take a minute challenge, but 60 seconds out of their day to whatever it is that works for them. If it's taking the downtime, taking deep breathing, if it's prayer, if it's, whatever it is, but it really helps them to train their brain to slow down and take a minute, take a moment. But even that simple task, again, not every child is going to be accepting of that in the class, but the children that can be pretty life-changing to them as well. Because again, some kids are never going to be able to get therapy, unfortunately. So we have to find some elements of wellness to teach them, especially on their entrepreneurship journey as well. We definitely would need the self-care. So that's just one example.
Awesome. Thank you
I think
for
there's
that.
someone else in the back.
Yes.
I had a question. How do you try to motivate and have the buy-in from other staff members? Because I hustle hard for the kids. Like, I mean, I have a few people that have been in here yesterday, today, but I'm taking a group of students to Rome next spring.
Wow.
Nice.
And I can't get everyone to participate in supporting the kids. Like, it's not for me. It's their experience. And part of the challenge is financial. You know that. And I was just, I came up with QR codes for all the kids. Like, maybe, teams can adopt a certain student. Please take this QR code when you go to, like, Sunday football games or whatever. Or just even use your Cash App. Someone put Italy in there. It's not money for me. It's money for the kids. are some staff members that are just like not team kids. And not even just for this particular thing, but even supporting like our sporting events or our debate events. Like what do you think we could or should do to have buy-in to support them? Because it's not for me, it's for them. So they can see us as real people outside of the teacher way, you know?
Right.
Like,
So we would have to probably ask ourselves, like, why are they not participating? Some of them are probably tired, probably stressed, probably don't have the funds themselves. I'm curious, how many kids are you looking to take to Rome? And where are you as far as the fundraising, and how much are you short?
some of the kids are on a complete struggle bus because, parents have not completely participated. And I think part of it is, we're a school system where everything is free lunch and everything is free. And they think, and I thought they would have an understanding, once you kind of pay the deposit, you do have to have a financial commitment. And yes, we've done fundraising, and yes, we've secured lots of funds. You still need to purchase your passport. Like, it's not free. I've had workshops. I've done, like, I'm trying to keep my hands in my pockets so I don't strangle the kids.
Right.
And even with, like, the teachers, it's like everyone knows this process. Like, I'm trying not to have white hair and
Right. So one thing is just to know, and I've learned this in entrepreneurship and business, is that you got to free yourself and know that everybody is not going to be as passionate about you. As the passion that you have, the excitement, the zeal, just don't be discouraged when other people don't have that same buy-in, that same level of passion, that same level of commitment. You got to just not be discouraged there. The educators that's not giving, I don't know if you all have any input, but I would say, maybe they don't have it to give, but if we can create something to where they can at least post it, if they could at least share it on their social media, right, with just some different levels of support. But I would say just try not to, because that can frustrate you. Like, okay, parents, everything can be free. Meet me halfway. At least get your passport. Like, I get it, right? I think that next level for you now is to say, okay, I'm going to tap into now nonprofits and organizations and foundations and social media to see how I can go about raising the funds, and then maybe seeing if there are some other families that could also sponsor some kids once they are able to take care of their current child. Because I think you said some of them are like really on the struggle bus, probably haven't raised a penny. And then here's one more thing. Maybe that Rome is part 2. Maybe you say, I'm going to take you all on a trip to DC or a trip to Washington. And then let me get this going so that I can get it filmed and videoed and cast a vision. And now you have something to go to sponsors next year and say, hey, you see how this changed these kids' life? I took them to this museum. I took them to Florida. I took them to DC, like wherever. Now we want to take a trip to Rome. Now we want to take the trip to Spain. Now we want to take a trip to Japan. But we need your financial contribution to give these kids an experience that they've never had before. So that's just a thought. Like, if it doesn't work out this year and this is like, man, we just did not get the funding, because these are big moves, right? You've got schools that are not all free and reduced lunch, and they're not even taking trips to Rome. Yeah. So hats off to you. Come on, can we put our hands together for even having the vision, the passion, the audacity to say, you know what? These babies, these children deserve a trip to Rome. But it's frustrating because it's like you don't have the means. So I get that. And so I would say that continue to tap into your resources. Make it, of course, I'm a man of faith, right? So make it a matter of prayer and petition, and then seeing how that social media community can get behind you as well. That would be my feedback I would give you. But really proud of you and excited. And reach out to Ebony. I can give you my my information, and we will look to see what it would take to maybe sponsor one of those kids as well, okay? Yeah, for sure.
She has information.
No, hey, but that's good.
Yeah.
So I'm sure Cash App, Venmo, check, whatever.
Is there QR codes
Okay.
That way it's not like they're gonna get Uber Eats. It goes to them.
Okay.
Like they're paid.
That's good. That's good. So in closing, I'll come to you and then to you. Let's put the focus now on them. What do you do day in and day out, at home, at night, in the morning, in the evening to take care of you? You've got a new baby. You got your family. You've been teaching for 10 years, operating at a high level, but you still got peace. You still got joy. What do you do? What are non-negotiables? What are the boundaries that you set? Like, what do you do to make sure that you're in the best place possible? So you can still be that mother, you can still be that wife, you can still be that teacher, that coach, you're so many more things, right? But what is it that you do that they need to know that they could possibly apply in their lives as well?
And I can't lie about this one. This has been the biggest, hardest pill to swallow as an educator because I'm a yes man. Haley, will you do this? Yes. Will you do this? Yes. And I just
if you can relate to that, raise your hand.
Absolutely. It's all for the kids. I mean, that's why you're here, right? You want to be better for them. So I'm the biggest yes man, and it's been feeling that burnout when we had my first child, and being like, wow. He just did this and I didn't get to see it because I was doing so much. And so my biggest tip to educators is, and it's been hard because it's more work. I don't bring anything home. My computer's on my desk at school right now. I didn't bring a bag home. My lunchbox is sitting in my car at the airport. That's all I brought. The best part has been not bringing anything home because it's such a cliche, but you're replaceable at work and you're not replaceable at home. And
wow.
getting to see my two kids grow, and I have taken a step back from coaching, which has been hard because God, I love the boys and I love the cheerleading and all that, but I can still make an impact on them without being at every single thing. And my husband's passion, he's also an educator, is basketball. He played in college. He wants to coach. He wants to do that thing, and learning that okay, I can take a step back and he can live his passion right now because I've done that. And just knowing that I'm not replaceable at home and taking that time for me. Those papers are going to get graded eventually, and the school's not going to burn down if it's not graded in the next day, and kids are going to get their grades. But literally, I don't take it home. I can't.
Boundaries and pace yourself. It sounds like that. Yep.
Yeah.
For you, Doc?
Yeah, for me, and again, I will self-disclose that years back, especially starting the practice, I was horrific at self-care, frankly. I did so much stuff. I was running around, running ragged. I barely got sleep. I was on this, which I totally don't recommend. Was it Team No Sleep, Hustle Hard, just a horrible, good mentality, but there was no self-care with it.
Hashtag Team No Sleep. Wow.
Back then I had a Fitbit, and literally I would track, and it would be 2 hours this night, 3 hours, and I was yeah, I don't need sleep. Horrible. Yeah.
Beast mode.
Horrible idea. Not recommended. But then years back, to your point too, around when my son was born, I was okay, there is no way I can add on this responsibility of taking care of this child and everything else I do without the proper self-care. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was literally making a commitment first, non-negotiable, I have to have my self-care. What that looks like for me, and I did change every morning. I used to want to run to Instagram, let me see what's going on the gram. And I was okay, first, I'm going to have a conversation with God. And every single day, I'm okay, what am I grateful for today? So not just friends, family, but today, in this day, what am I grateful for? That's what I do every single morning when I wake up, before I get to Instagram, then Instagram. But first, that conversation. I do a lot. This season of my life, I am the craziest, busiest schedule I've ever had, but I also work out more than I ever have, too. You know what I'm saying? We always say, oh, we don't have time. But it's not really true when you now have to sacrifice other things, right? But that is really important to me because physically, I work on training my brain to have more mental toughness. So I have some grueling workouts, but the mental toughness from that is what I need in my life, right? And along with I do, like I said, the take a minutes, I do those all the time. So usually I'm traveling to one speaking engagement or another. I take the time to watch the sunrise, the sunset. I'm out in nature. I'm looking at mountains because we don't have that in Florida, whatever it is, just appreciating the moment, even if it's 60 seconds, taking that time. And that for me has been life-changing. And I have a commitment, I have to have the self-care in order to do what I do. I have to.
I love it. So the morning ritual.
Yeah.
Setting boundaries, prioritizing self-care, getting more than 3 hours of sleep.
Oh, yes. Now it's 7. 7 is the average.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that.
And working out often because you feel stronger. You got fresh blood pumping through your
Yeah.
body, that's a good thing. So, Haley, thank you.
Thank you for
Dr.
having me.
Nekeshia Hammond, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening. We hope you got so much value and enjoyed it. Show our guests some love. And man, just really excited for you all in this new season of your life, what you all are doing. You know, we're in the last quarter of the year. You know, we got a couple of weeks in November. Before you know it, it'll be Thanksgiving, then it'll be the Christmas holiday. But I want to challenge you all as well to really take some time for yourself, to really prioritize you. Take what you learned from us today, from my presentation, from the other presenters, not just how to be better educators that can support these students when it comes to entrepreneurship, but educators that really prioritize themselves. Educators who set boundaries, educators who really work on that inner peace, because the stronger you are on the inside, the more it's going to show on the outside. That's our time. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. That was awesome.
That was great.
All right.
Team podcast.